we would basically be a $1 billion company overnight. Get as many people as possible addicted to government funding. Hey, I'm Robert Bortons, the CEO of Classical Conversations, and I was recently at another conservative policy event where part of the event was promoting universal school choice. It was in Arizona, and there was about 300 conservative leaders, many who you'd recognize on TV or you've bought in their books. So this is the who's who of the conservative movement. They had a 30-minute main talk on universal school choice and an hour-and-a-half working group panel that discussed educational policy at large at this event. I was able to give a 3-minute speech where I tried to lay out in that small amount of time the biblical case against the government subsidizing education, especially Christian education. And before my speech, my friend Steven, who helps homeschoolers in other countries, had a 1-minute speech. Altogether, we had about 4 minutes of truth to stand up to about 2 hours of deceit. And I think we were able to change some minds because people came up to me afterwards saying that they had agreed with us, that they had not heard these arguments before, and were not going to support universal school choice anymore. And so Steven gets on stage and he says he's seen similar programs before in other countries and that they have been used to subjugate the private sector. And then he went on to say, I want to take a poll. Raise your hand if you are against universal health care. And of course, nearly everyone raised their hand. Raise your hand if you're against universal basic income. And nearly everyone raised their hand. Then he said, raise your hand if you are against universal school choice. And about 10% of us enthusiastically raised our hands, and then a third of the room started to before quickly pulling it back down. I'm sure many realized their hypocrisy. About 30 minutes later, I gave my 3-minute speech, and I want to share that with you now. Hello, my friend Rachel is a leader for us in Arizona, and we don't let our Christian leaders take neoliberal school choice funds. She was recently talking to a friend who had taken the ESA money and was so happy that she had these free funds. Her friend told Rachel, I used to have to work part-time in order to homeschool. I would have my aunt come over and watch the kids for me so that I could go to work. Now I don't have to do that. Now Rachel, being trained in the tools of rhetoric, politely said, so let me make sure I understand what you're saying. You used to have to rely on hard work in your family, and now you rely on the government. Her friend's eyes got wide as she began to realize what she had done. Since when was relying on government to subsidize family income a conservative policy? Let's check ourselves versus biblical principles. The Israelites wanted to return to slavery in Egypt for the benefits and security and bow their knee to the government instead of enjoying the freedom of their God. Right now, we have the freedom to educate our kids and an interdependency on our neighbors, but some people are advocating we return to the government for the benefit and security of tax dollars. Let's look at Jesus in the New Testament. Has anyone bought into this idea that I'm already paying for schools, so I should get mine? Well, Jesus was asked a similar question, and he responded, if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2. For a little bit of context, this Roman law was an attack on identity. It was designed to show the Jews who they belonged to the Romans. When Christians pay for our own child's education, we walk that 2nd mile. We belong to the true King. Our identity is in him. When Christians advocate that Rome forces others to carry our burdens for 1 mile, well, you tell me what that sounds like. As Christians, our King promises to take care of our needs. In Hebrews 13:5, it says, keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have, because God has said, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. Finally, Jesus told the story of the builder who built on sand and the one who built on the rock. We know building institutional structures on government funding is building on the sand. Why waste your time advocating for that? Why not choose to build on the rock? Do we really want to normalize relying on the government for funding? Universal basic education income is not a conservative policy. It is a neoliberal policy. Just wait for Amazon, Disney, Microsoft, and Apple to start buying up these schools and implementing their ESG goals into all private school platforms. Wait until Communist China starts buying up the schools like they are already doing in states like Florida. I invite you to join a movement where we fund our own education and the educational needs of the poor as God commanded in Ephesians 4:28. Let the thief no longer steal, but rather let him labor, doing honest work with his own hands, so that he may have something to share with anyone in need. Join our movement by going to educationalindependence.net. I urge you to abandon this platform of universal school choice, paid for by taxes, collected through extortion of your neighbors. I'll leave you with this familiar verse, Joshua 24:15. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourself this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates or the God of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Got a little bit of applause. I think I got a lot of people to change their minds and maybe even made the main stage speaker thrown off their game a little bit later, because I am always all ears when someone is telling me the other side's arguments. I just want y'all to know, like, by no means are we close to being a 9-digit a year revenue company. But if we advocated for school choice in all states and really got almost no new clients and said Classical Conversations is now free, we would basically be a billion-dollar company overnight. We could spin up a government compliance department and help people file for their free money, and et cetera, et cetera. We know how to do it. And guess what? Instead of flying coach, I could buy a new airplane every single year with the profits. If we just got on board, as one of these leaders said, we could be heroes. I listen intently to people with other perspective because I am, and we are, giving up nearly $1 billion a year in state revenue to take this stand. So as I mentioned earlier, we had our 4 minutes. They have their 2 hours. So I'm listening to this first speaker who has about a 30-minute segment. She runs schools in Florida, and her husband is a congressman. And she's talking about how she can help more students and that they're thankful for the private payers at their schools because the state hasn't paid them yet for those voucher students. And they couldn't have the teachers working if the students who were privately paying hadn't paid already. She also mentioned that this is a new free market option. And she liked to use that word a lot. She said a free market is when the government gives everyone the same amount of money and they can spend it anywhere they want. And all I could think of is that scene from The Princess Bride.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
I can only hope that her continued misuse of the term free market did not win anyone to her side. Later, in the working session, which ended up being a lot less about universal school choice and more about other educational reforms, many which I think would be generally good, there was a time for Q&A, and a gentleman raised his hand to ask a question, which I'll summarize. I'm opening nearly 60 schools this year. Do you have any advice on how to set up the structure of funding, since we are getting this money now, but it's just one election cycle from possibly being removed, and I would have to let a lot of people go if that happened? And this conservative leader, who was on the stage earlier, responded, what you need to do is grow the school very quickly and get as many people as possible taking the money so that it'll be politically impossible to defund. My jaw dropped and my hand hit my head. A so-called conservative leader advocating that we get Americans addicted to government funding. So, my billion-dollar quest to prove that I am wrong continues. If you would like to join our movement, go to educationalindependence.net, read the declaration, and sign it and share it with a friend.